This channel has made every effort to work within the guidelines of the copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. This work is distributed free of charge and the author does not monetize the truth. The original works are referenced and the purpose of their use is educational commentary criticism. This video has also been censored to fall within YouTube's new guidelines regarding hate speech, fake cures, and flat earth. Mall Angel debunks global view of perspective. And all it took was this one thumbnail to do it. You see, ever since Pythagoras suggested that Earth moves, occultists have been using ships disappearing from the bottom up as proof of curvature. But you will see now that curvature has nothing to do with the functions of perspective. This thumbnail is two stills from the recent video I took at the Lakeline Mall in the Austin, Texas area. I chose this location to meet a few criteria. First, I was looking for the longest straight and flat floor I could find that was open to the public. Next, I wanted the space to be conditioned air with both natural and artificial lighting mixed. And lastly, I wanted a non-reflective floor. Lakeline Mall was perfect for this shot with an end-to-end unobstructed hallway on the second floor that was carpeted, plus the atrium ceiling offered excellent natural but not direct lighting. What I really need you to understand up front and clearly is that the difference between these two images is that the one on the left was taken at eye level and the one on the right was taken with the camera sitting level on the ground. The camera used for this observation was the Nikon P-1000 recording in 4K. Now a bit needs to be said regarding the P-1000. It has the best optical zoom the common person can buy. It has a 3000mm optical focal length, which equates to 125x zoom. When you think of the photographers on the sidelines of professional sports with their huge telephoto lenses, they generally top out with a 400mm focal length and are quite expensive. I did some looking for the largest consumer telescope and found a 25-inch that's about 20 grand. But when you look at the specs, its focal length is just 2,540 millimeters. It will work in low light way better than the P-1000, but is nearly 500 millimeters, or an entire professional sports photographer's lens, short of the magnification we get with the P-1000. I make this point because the hand-wave dismissal will come from those that will want to suggest that what we are seeing in this footage is an aberration of low-quality consumer-grade electronics, when in fact that claim could not be farther from the truth. What you're about to see is the pinnacle of what we can observe with our top technology of the day. The other dismissal would come from those that find this footage too amazing to be true and would think that it is CGI. So I recorded a side view of the camera showing its level and the view screen, plus I live streamed it. You can find the live stream published on my channel titled Mall Perspective, streamed live June 3rd, 2019. We need to look at what is the global view of perspective. Sly Sparkane is an avid heliocentrist and made a video depicting the global view of perspective. Let's see how it's explained and where the mental trickery takes place.
This is Jerry. His eyes can only see so far upwards and so far downwards. This is called his field of view.
And we have multiple problems already. What you are looking at is a real field of view. Your field of view is defined by the limits you can see side to side and from top to bottom. Within your field of view, everything that you observe will be affected by perspective. Anyone showing you a side-on or orthographic view two-dimensionally is intentionally eliminating perspective. The way Sly is depicting perspective could not be more misleading. Never allow someone to lecture you on perspective while referencing a side-on or orthographic view. Two-dimensional drawings or models lack something that perspective requires, and that is 3 dimensions. Perspective includes the 3rd dimension, and it's called depth of field.
When Jerry looks at an object, the imaginary line between his eye and the object is called his line of sight. When Jerry looks across a level plane, anything remaining equal height across the ground, this is called his eye level. This is Jerry's house. On the door, there's a peephole. This peephole is at Jerry's eye level. And if you move the house across the plane to any distance, that peephole will always remain at his eye level.
This claim is ridiculously not true. In fact, it relies on extreme levels of cognitive dissonance and the Dunning-Kruger effect for people to be misled by it. Because everyone in day-to-day life witnesses objects of the same size reducing in angular size with distance and disappearing from the bottom up at a distance to the horizon based on our elevation, at a point called the vanishing point. The vanishing point is at the horizon, and if the object is below the horizon line, its vanishing lines angle up to the horizon line. If the object is above, they slope down. All vanishing lines end at the horizon line. Lakeline Mall gave me an excellent way to demonstrate this. There was a group of massage chairs with identical pedestals and lamps on crosswalks at the far ends of the mall. I rested the P-1000 on the handrail at one end of the mall and lined up the handrails of the crosswalks. This not only confirmed that Lakeline Mall is not built curved, but you can clearly see that the farther lamp is not only smaller in angular size, but lower as well. Plus, you can see which direction the angles of perspective go. You will see that Sly subliminally inverts the way perspective works by taking you to a 2D side-on or orthographic view when explaining angular size.
When Jerry looks at his house when it is close, it takes up a large portion of his field of view. That's called the object's angular size. If we move his house away, the house takes up less of his field of view, and its angular size is smaller. But the peephole remains at his eye level. But to Jerry, it looks like his house got bigger and smaller as it got closer and further away. But really, the only thing that changed is its angular size, taking up more or less of his field of view.
While Sly is correct about angular size, the way he is representing it is backwards. Let me spin this around and fix this for him. You see, objects of the same size appear larger the closer they are to the observer and smaller in the distance. Plus, we need to tilt this down, assuming he meant for the house to be on the ground in his two-dimensional side-on or orthographic view. Of course, when you do this, it shows how ridiculous the statement about the peepholes always being eye height is.
Let's do some more perspective demonstrations.
Sly has actually done no perspective demonstrations, but let's skip ahead to see what he has to say about the horizon and curvature.
Right now, Jerry can see all of Natty, because Natty is standing on Jerry's visual horizon. The horizon is the last part of a curved surface that you can see. But beyond the horizon, Jerry can't see, because the surface he is standing on is curved and beyond the horizon is blocked. Now, if Natty moves to a further position, then he will start to disappear from the bottom up.
That statement is what this video is really all about. How the horizon works on a flat plane, and the fact that things disappear from the bottom up as they move away from you on a flat plane. But before we leave Sly's video, he does make one true statement, even though his 2D graphics are making the case for a global view of perspective that no one has ever witnessed.
Now, if Jerry moved to a higher position, then his line of sight is raised, and the horizon moves further away.
That statement alone, without the 2D graphics and the curvature being depicted, is true. But we need to get rid of Sly's diagram, and I'll show you the best video on the internet that both visually represents and explains the correlation between the horizon, our circle of sight, and the height of the observation. That video is titled True Perspective, Looking Beyond the Vanishing Point of Our Circle of Sight, produced by the Limitless channel.
This video is for the edification of the truth. It clearly demonstrates that objects leaving your position appear to disappear from the ground up, and objects approaching you in this reality appear from the sky down. In this reality, our vision is limited to what is called a horizon line. This line runs a 360-degree circle of sight completely around us at all times. The outer line marks the maximum distance of our field of view, and it is the boundary of our horizon line at 360 degrees all around us. These diagrams and observations are of a plain, flat view. At this part of the demonstration, the red and blue objects clearly can't see each other because their horizon lines haven't intersected. So from both perspectives, neither object can see each other because their field of view hasn't intersected. As the two objects' circle of sight approach each other, their fields of view intersect. So in this simulation, we see the blue dot appearing to rise above our horizon. Yet we know that it is still partially blocked and lies beyond our actual horizon line. As the blue dot continues approaching the red dot, it appears to be rising at the horizon, but it's still perceived behind the horizon line. As soon as the blue object crosses the circle of sight or field of view of the red object, it then enters the field of view and crosses into the horizon line of the red object and becomes entirely visible. As the two objects align, their fields of view completely overlap. As the blue object moves further away from the red, it then begins to set on the opposite horizon until finally it completely disappears beyond the field of view.
But wait, Jerry has one last question. If the surface he is standing on is curved, then why does he not see the curve? Well, that one's pretty easy. It has to do with the distance of the horizon. If you are standing on a curved surface, the horizon is a certain distance away from you and at a certain angle in your line of sight. Any direction you look, the horizon is at the same distance at that same angle. So it won't look like it's curving.
So that right there is the heliocentric explanation for why we do not see a curve. The problem with it is that it demands that objects being obscured from the bottom up be changing their plumb to the center of a sphere. You can clearly see that if curvature was the reason things were disappearing from the bottom up at the horizon, that all of the objects would be leaning away from you. The Limitless channel accurately portrayed the horizon on a flat plane three-dimensionally, which means that it actually includes perspective. Sly's 2D orthographic crayon drawing representation of how things disappear from the bottom up will now be put to rest with actual 4K max zoom capability footage that shows objects disappearing from the bottom up on a flat and level floor. Sly had one last message he wanted to leave his viewers with, and he got it backwards again.
So its curvature is basically unnoticeable.
Let me go ahead and fix that for him again, and we will check out the footage we have been waiting for. Looks like when that person right there is out of the way, we've got a pretty clear shot. So you get an idea of the mall that we're dealing with. Alright, here we go. She asked what I was doing, and I told her I'm a YouTuber. She said, oh yeah, what kind of topics? And told her conspiracy, and I guess her and her boyfriend are conspiracy people. So we'll see how many conspiracies she's familiar with. When she gets back here, you'll see that she actually does have feet. Out of the shot. Finally got a pretty clear path. I'm going to be documenting the floor in here, the railings. This mall is not built on a curve. They're flat floors. Feet are coming back. Take my level off. Alright, great. That was awesome. Yeah, the people kept on showing up. That's probably all the footage I need.
Yeah?
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate it.
You have what you need, though, like,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yep, I'm pretty sure that's all the footage I needed right there. But we loaded up with more. Let's take a look at some of the clip closer together and we will look at the conclusions that can be drawn from it. As you can see here at the beginning of this clip, the mall has a carpeted hallway on the second floor that has excellent ambient, not direct lighting. The mall is built flat and level, and for anyone to argue that point, I'm going to require that you show me the original construction plans submitted to the city for the development of this property. While standing, the horizon of where the back wall meets the floor rises to eye level and the floor is visible the entire distance. But when the camera is placed on the ground, the horizon is moved to about the midpoint of the mall and anything beyond it begins disappearing from the bottom up, at what is known as the vanishing point. The amazing thing is that when the distance to the horizon is the smallest with the camera sitting on the ground, we now have the technology to zoom 125x in 4K to observe the way this reality works. What you are now witnessing has nothing to do with curvature and everything to do with perspective. The height of the observer and its direct connection to the distance to the horizon, where we see things disappear from the bottom up. At the beginning of this video, I stated that the global view of perspective could be debunked with just the thumbnail. Now you have seen the context in which that thumbnail was derived and understand that picture on the left was taken at eye height, where the distance to the horizon is farther back than the wall. And the picture on the right was taken with the camera on the ground, where the horizon is now at just half the length of the mall. This is the baseboard. When you recognize that, and you see the mall angel has no feet, it becomes clear that she is disappearing from the bottom up. Everything beyond the horizon begins to have a wavy jello distortion effect applied to it. And because this demonstration was done in a conditioned air environment, we know that heat distortion played no part in what we're seeing. It is also quite easy to see that our mall angel is not just getting smaller in totality, but disappearing from the bottom up while shrinking in angular size. Our mall angel has debunked the global view of perspective. And with this evidence, I'm going to state the law of perspective as it is, not how others define it. The horizon is the place where objects begin disappearing from the bottom up and is based on the height of the observer. Objects do not diminish in totality. What I just stated is verifiable as fact. What I have not answered yet is why the horizon drops a little bit as the observer rises, like I pointed out earlier with my drone footage of the Lake Pontchartrain Causeway Bridge that documented the 25-mile-long bridge was not conforming to curvature. The whole perspective topic is the hottest thing going in the curved versus not curved debate. And I would like to use the words of a person considered to be at the very top of the online community for the heliocentric view. And that is Red's Rhetoric, who the Limitless channel and myself already defeated in the most epic heliocentric versus not curved debate. In his recent hangout that he made a point of leaving published, which he normally does not, these words were spoken. Now please keep in mind that this was a staged debate with top heliocentrists against a fake non-curved Earth shill that calls himself the Aussie Jesus. While the Aussie Jesus character did get enough things about perspective correct to trigger his heliocentric counterparts, he intentionally got wrong a key point to give the heliocentrists the upper hand. Let's listen.
I know. I'm worried.
It means I'm talking about fucking reality and the way we perceive it.
So does the horizon?
You don't understand it. That's not my problem.
Does the horizon rise to eye level? Is that what I just heard you say?
Mm-hmm. Yes, you did, Sean.
So as you gain altitude, does the horizon continue to rise to your eye level?
Yes, it does.
Thank you very much.
Yes, it does.
My God.
The horizon is 100% created by your eyes on.
So do you want me to debunk you on that bullshit? We have both tested this.
Yes.
While Aussie Jesus does deserve to be laughed at for saying that the horizon always rises to eye level of the observer, he was correct that the horizon is created by our eyes on. Reds and Sean are not the only ones to have tested this. What you are looking at now is 4K footage taken by me that of course I have a live stream to validate that it's not CGI, of a double sunset induced by raising the eye level of the observer and thus increasing the circle of sight. The footage you are seeing on the main screen has been crop zoomed 200% to give us a little closer look at what we can see. I have added the perspective matrix on top of the footage, and the red line you see is exactly half the height of the footage. I've duplicated that line and will now move it over so that you can see that the center of the perspective matrix is perfectly dead center. As you can see right now, the horizon is slightly above center frame while the drone is hovering just above the treetops. This makes sense to me considering that looking west, the topography rises farther above sea level. I wait for the sun to completely set below the horizon, and then raise the drone as fast as I can to its peak elevation of 1,639 feet. With my expanded view to the horizon, I have now brought the sun back into my circle of sight where we can watch it set one more time from this vantage point. Now while we are waiting for the sun to set again, I want to point out that this footage was captured June 6, 2019. On June 6, the sun was setting at a compass heading of 297 degrees. My recording location was just outside of Bastrop, and if we use Google Earth, you can see that the sun was sitting directly in line with downtown Austin from my location. The distance from my location to downtown Austin was just short of 25 miles, and the elevation was 38 feet higher in downtown Austin than where I was filming from. When you see that Austin is in no shape or form visible at a distance short of 25 miles, it becomes clear that our horizon drop has to do with the limit to the distance that we can see. And that distance is determined by the height of the observer. I am going to talk about distance to the horizon calculators in a little bit, but let's first listen to a little bit more of the Reds Reddit crew's stance on this topic.
So if a drone
Sean,
goes up,
do me a favor.
it's going opposite.
What about that drone footage that you have capturing multiple sunrises, Sean? You want to explain that?
That's what I'm talking about right now.
Yeah, that won't happen on flat Earth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that wouldn't happen. on Earth.
That would only happen on a sphere because that's literally how
Only
it
happened
works.
on a Earth, Craig.
No, it,
No,
could,
it
it
wouldn't.
couldn't happen
You
on
are
a
so
Earth at all.
stupid. You can't understand it. You have to go
Jesus,
over
Jesus,
the
you
curve
already
to
hold on,
see
hold on.
over the curve.
So far, we have been told that it would not and could not happen on a non-curved Earth. And the first 27 minutes of this video has all been about showing that it's been proven that things disappear from the bottom up based on the elevation of the observer on what we know is a flat plane. The Limitless channel showed us the accurate way to visualize how this works on a flat plane using perspective. What I want to do now so that you can clearly see why the horizon drops and why we can bring the sun back into view by raising our observation height is take you into a behind the scenes look at how 3D animation software deals with this situation. For that, I'm going to bring you into Motion 5. So here we are in Motion 5. Motion is a program that allows you to record 3D scenes. Just like we understand that our eyes do not see an infinite distance, computers do not render objects to infinity as well. In fact, the similarities to how our eyesight works and the way a computer renders a scene is identical. Let me get you familiar with a few things in this editor. First, I want you to understand what an orthographic view is. We have 6 of them in a 3D environment. Front, back, left, right, top, and bottom. Let's start with the front. You see our scene, but there is no depth of field. Everything has been stretched like you were looking at a flat elevation blueprint of the scene. Let's look at our left orthographic view. Now you can see that there is depth to our scene. We have a video wall that you can no longer see because it has no depth to it, some 3D text, a solar flare layer, and closest to the camera, a 3D cube. Before we get into our perspective view, I want to show you something from the side orthographic view. I want to get you familiar with the camera. The camera sees the view that will be rendered with perspective included. Just like a real camera or our eyes would see it. We can set the camera to any position within 3D space and adjust its angle a full 360 degrees on all 3 axes. But the super important thing to note is that the camera has a limited distance that it can see. just like our eyes. You can clearly see that as I move the camera further away, the scene is disappearing in layers. Only a certain distance from the camera is going to be rendered, and this has to do with resolution and the conservation of processing power. For this demonstration, I'm working in 1080. Once I have pulled the camera back to a point where the rendered object is smaller than 1 pixel, the computer has no reason to calculate the object because it is no longer renderable. If I was working in 4K, I could draw the camera back 4 times further. The problem lies in that computers can process nothing that is infinite. The moment you ask any computer to process any irrational number like pi or the Fibonacci sequence, or render a line or a plane to infinity, will be the last time you get to use that computer. A new record was set for calculating pi this spring. It was calculated to 31.4 trillion decimal places using 25 virtual machines run through Google Cloud's compute engine. Quote, "The biggest challenge with pi is that it requires a lot of storage and memory to calculate. The calculation requires 170 terabytes of data, about the same amount of data as the entire Library of Congress. They pulled the plug after about 4 months of calculating." Now do not think that pi is special in any sort of way. Any number that does not terminate as a whole number or a fraction will break your computer as well. Same with any line or plane that you ask the computer to render to infinity. The moment you try, there goes your memory and your storage until you stop it. The place to stop it is just beyond where your system is going to be able to render it due to its resolution. There are some people who know that they are in a simulation that argue that any sort of infinite damnation is impossible because no known technology or concept could ever complete such a task. But to those people, I'd like to point out the obvious answer: looping. This 1-minute clip keeps going round and round forever with no strain on memory and storage. So now let's look at this scene in the perspective view. The perspective view is much more processor intensive because every surface is being redrawn to represent its correct orientation in 3D space from the observer's position. It is not the camera view though. It is a preview of what the camera view would be like, but without the field of view of the camera framing the shot. From the perspective view, it is easy to see the depth and orientation of all the objects in the shot. Here comes the entire reason for bringing you into Motion 5 and getting you familiar with the various orthographic views. You will soon see the explanation for why the horizon drops on a flat plane. As I elevate my observation height while in perspective view, you will see the horizon remains fixed, or what one may consider to be eye height, your eyes on. This is true in both directions of either raising the observer's height above the plane or lowering it below the plane. But if we go far enough, you will begin to see that the computer is cheating incredibly. It's attempting to simulate an infinite plane. You can clearly see that it is not truly rendering all of these lines to infinity, because if it was, the horizon would be a razor flat line. The X and Y axis have been drawn to the horizon line and a loose mesh has been laid on top of these axes to represent an infinite plane. Keep in mind that if any one of these lines were to be actually drawn to infinity, the moment you initiated that process, the computer would dedicate all of its processing power and storage until that process was stopped. Nothing can be rendered to infinity. This is where the mental construct of the horizon always remaining at eye level is flawed. We conceptualize an infinite plane where in reality no such thing can exist. even in a computer. Now let's go back to our camera view, but line up the shot the same way we have it here in our perspective view. Now as I am raising the height to the observer and lowering it, I'm asking you to please remember that in our camera view, we are only seeing what is going to be rendered. Anything beyond what can be rendered as a pixel will not be shown. Because we are not seeing what would hypothetically be rendered as a continuation of an infinite plane, our scene is cut off. This results in and is our explanation of why the horizon drops based on the height or depth of the observer. We do not see to infinity, nor does a computer. We both see objects disappearing from the bottom up at the horizon line with distance, and we both see the horizon drop due to the height of the observer. This brings up the topic of distance to the horizon. All of the calculators that you will find will say that they are built off of curvature. We know from the mall that the distance to the horizon has nothing to do with curvature. Distance to the horizon calculators are built off of math that is designed to mimic the effect of perspective. That being said, they can be used to a point, but the real way to determine the distance to the horizon is to model your shot in scale in 3D software, and then to go test with top-level technology whether or not our shots match. There is a lot of disinformation out there suggesting ground-based observations of objects 50 miles plus, but I do assure you that if they do exist, they are extremely rare, requiring specific massive objects, specific viewing angles, and perfect weather conditions. While Ronnie Harris of the Limitless channel may be the first person to publish a video accurately explaining objects disappearing from the bottom up on a non-curved plane, I humbly admit that this might be the first accurate explanation for the reason why the horizon drops as an observer raises in height. For those that have followed my previous work, you will know that I have known for about 6 years now that this reality is a simulation of sorts. Not that it's not real, but real in a way that has been occulted from us. Proving that objects disappear from the bottom up and that the horizon drops due to perspective exactly the way they do with 3D computer animation is just one tiny fact out of many for my stance. The rest of that content can be found on the Limitless channel, Beyond Flat Earth, and my Awake Souls channel. I will leave you with one more rant from Red's Rhetoric and crew.
Reach at
Hey,
about 3 miles distance.
Jeez, quit rambling off all that bullshit. Now,
I'm
check
not
this-
rambling, mate. I'm telling you the
Yes,
truth.
are. Yes, you are, mate. Okay.
If you're
rambling
looking
bullshit.
over a distance of 3 miles across flat level water, that flat level water will appear to rise to eye level.
Okay,
And
here's
create
what
some
we're
security
gonna
points.
do. Here's what we're gonna do. Okay. Basically, Fire Flossy Jesus, while I would love for you to demonstrate that you don't understand perspective in the fucking slightest,
I've just
we're gonna
explained it to
no,
you.
no, you
Reg.
didn't. No, you didn't.
I just
no,
did.
didn't.
You weren't
No.
listening. I
No.
just did.
No, you didn't. Because here's the thing. Here's
Yes,
the
I
thing.
did.
Perspective does not arbitrarily make things disappear bottom up. That is not what perspective does. And every single fucking time you say
It
that,
creates
you
convergence
demonstrate that you
points
don't
at your
know.
eye level.
Yeah, but the convergence points disappears in
nothing-
totality, not bottom up
No,
and then
it
eventually out of sight,
No.
you dumbass.
No.
That's the
Right.
way
Not if it's
perspective works.
higher.
Perspective
What
is
if it's higher
quite
than the
literally
convergence
alpha
points at
equals
eye
2
level?
times the arctan of g over 2r, where alpha is the angular size of an object, g is the actual size of the object, r is the distance to the object. The law of perspective does not stay anywhere in that equation where height is even a fucking factor. The very moment you bring height into your equation, you are not talking about perspective anymore. So every single time you bring that up, you are showing everyone that you are in fact a fucking dumbass and should win dumb fuck of the year. Sorry, Riley. Perspective does not arbitrarily make things disappear bottom up. The convergence points disappears in totality, not bottom up and then eventually out of sight, you dumbass. That's the way perspective works. Perspective does not arbitrarily make things disappear bottom up. Perspective is quite literally alpha equals 2 times the arctan of g over 2r, where alpha is the angular size of an object, g is the actual size of the object, r is the distance to the object. The law of perspective does not stay anywhere in that equation where height is even a fucking factor. The very moment you bring height into your equation, you are not talking about perspective anymore. So every single time you bring that up, you are showing everyone that you are in fact a fucking dumbass and should win dumb fuck of the year. Perspective does not arbitrarily make things disappear bottom up. That you are in fact a fucking dumbass and should win dumb fuck of the year.
Sorry, Reds. That title goes to you.
And we are your top search for news and information regarding Christianity, simulation reality, and flat-out truth. Join us as we broadcast worldwide. Wednesdays, Fridays, and Sundays on the Awake Souls channel at 8 p.m. Central. Because together, we are reality witnesses.